Friends, tonight, forget the majestic banners and the shining armor. We are entering the true, terrifying reality of a medieval castle, the Stone Freezer. The moment you cross that portcullis, the air changes. The cold here doesn't just nip, it is a sentient predator, a bone marrow aching chill that sinks into your very DNA. Look at the walls. They are not protection. They are giant thermal batteries that absorb the day's sunlight only to unleash freezing dampness at night. Historians romanticize these fortresses, but the shocking truth is this: you would not last a single night here. You, with your modern understanding of warmth, would surrender to the frost before the first cock crow. The wealthy nobles, the lords and ladies who owned these magnificent cold traps, were often the most miserable. They had the furs, the tapestries, the spiced wine, but they lacked the one thing that truly mattered: effective insulation. Tonight, we uncover the visceral, desperate strategies they used, from cuddling animals to sleeping with heated stones, to survive their own magnificent structures. But first, are you ready to witness the freezing, brutal reality that even wealth and power could not defeat? The first enemy is the very foundation beneath your feet. You trudge across the great hall, your boots clanking against flagstones that radiate no warmth, only icy indifference. Archaeological evidence confirms these floors were unyielding slabs of raw stone, chosen for durability, not comfort. Every step seems to leach the heat directly out of your soul, a slow, deliberate theft that makes your joints scream. You look up at the arrow slits, designed for defense, but which now betray their purpose, acting as icy mouths that invite the howling wind straight into the interior, turning the hall into a vast, unmanageable wind tunnel. The wind here is not merely air, it is a symphony of cold. It whistles mournfully through unseen cracks, creating uncanny sounds that medieval chroniclers sometimes mistook for ghostly sighs or wailing banshees trapped within the walls. This constant conversation between stone and wind was the soundtrack of the medieval night, a relentless reminder of the castle's apathy. To counter this, a thin scattering of rushes and hay was spread a necessity rather than a decoration. However, this floor covering quickly grew stale, damp, and pest-ridden, often hosting scurrying insects. It was a terrible comfort, but a comfort nonetheless, separating desperate flesh from unyielding stone. You drift toward the enormous hearth, the focal point of the great hall. The fire is a golden lie. Contemporary records repeatedly describe castle hearths as utterly inadequate for the cavernous spaces they were meant to warm. Even when dozens of logs blazed, the heat vanished upwards, drawn by tall, primitive chimneys that, as one writer bitterly noted, seemed to warm heaven more than earth. This insufficient heat forced nobles to spend lavishly on fuel, cartloads of oak, peat bricks, even dried animal dung, yet the fires were never enough. You cough, your throat stinging from the acrid smoke that rarely vented cleanly, coating the rafters in soot and staining the very air. The fire was symbolic, a place for gathering, but never a reliable shield against the night's genuine cold. To seek relief, you resort to layers, yet even this is a torment. You tug at the rough, heavy wool of your cloak, feeling the fabric scratch and chafe, stiff from years of wear and imperfect washing. For the nobility, this hardship was cushioned by furs, sable, fox, or lynx, and multiple linen undergarments. Yet, even wrapped in 7 coverings, noble women wrote letters complaining of shivering constantly. The very weight of the winter wardrobe was a burden, a physical reminder of the relentless cold. Worse than the cold was the damp. The stone walls perpetually sweated, moisture gathering in beads, fostering mold, mildew, and rot. This clammy air was insidious. It settled into clothes, warped wooden chests, and made the air heavy, raising concerns about winter fevers and chest infections. You realize that the castle was a paradoxical environment, freezing yet damp, airless yet drafty. The nobility fought the damp with fabric and disguise. They used thick tapestries and velvet drapes to cover the water-stained walls and create a buffer against the pervasive clamminess, a desperate attempt to deny the very geology of their fortress. Although scholars debate the protective effect, the tapestries were certainly a powerful psychological shield, softening the harshness of the stone. When the stomach cries out, the noble turns to liquid deception. You raise a goblet of spiced, warm wine, and a momentary flush spreads through your chest, a welcome heat that is immediately betrayed by the cold stone bench beneath you. Medieval physicians prescribed mulled wine to restore humors, but the truth was grim. Alcohol dilates blood vessels, bringing heat to the skin but lowering the core temperature. It was a false fire that fooled the body, making the final chill more profound. This deceptive warmth, often combined with heavy, rich food, was their main strategy against the cold at feasts, but its fleeting nature guaranteed that the misery would return in force. The cruelest proof of the cold's victory lies on the sideboard. You find jugs of water that have frozen solid, their contents transformed into pale blocks of ice. This is the hard truth of the medieval night. Even indoors, water refuses to remain liquid. Nobles faced the humiliation of breaking ice from their wash basins, and their servants had to chip frozen contents out of chamber pots. This desperate reality drove the nobility to prize hot drinks and led to curious anecdotes of guests demanding wine instead of water, hoping the frost cannot seize the vine. The long hours of thirst were an unshakable companion in this castle, a cruel reminder that the fortress offered shelter from enemies, but no respite from the siege of the season. But if the cold wins the fight against water, what hope do you have against the pests? Leaving the Grand Hall's deception, you encounter the harsh reality of labor and parasitic misery. You find the cramped servant lofts, where bodies are huddled together on straw pallets, not for intimacy, but for sheer survival. This is the plague of the pallets. The straw, damp and stale, is a breeding ground for lice, fleas, and bugs. You witness the sleeping servants' hands red, raw, and mottled with frostbite, the invisible toll of the cold etched into their flesh. They endure the itch and the cold, because survival outweighs dignity. A significant source of relief, however, was living heat. You observed the servants and guards sharing their cramped quarters with animals, dogs, and sometimes even small livestock, who acted as biological hot water bottles. This practice, seen as crude by later standards, was a pragmatic choice. A dog's body heat was often more reliable than the lord's failing hearth. Furthermore, the constant threat of frostbite and injury led to tragic anecdotes. Servants suffering frozen fingers, sometimes losing them, because their tasks required prolonged contact with icy floors and wash water. You understand that the cold here was not merely uncomfortable, it was cruel, permanently carving its mark into the most vulnerable bodies. Another indignity was the frozen sanitation. You pass the privy, latrine, a stone alcove exposed to the elements, realizing the seat is so cold it feels like sitting upon winter's teeth. The cold climbs the vertical shaft, making the act of relieving oneself a terrifying ordeal, often leading to the unsanctioned use of chamber pots, which then, inevitably, froze. The struggle for dignity and warmth continues, even in the most private moments. You enter the Lord's private chamber, the supposed pinnacle of comfort. Instead of rest, you find an elaborate system of defense against the cold. The noble sleeps beneath mountains of bedding, layers of wool, fur, throws, and down mattresses, all enclosed by heavy bed curtains designed to create a microclimate. Yet, even here, frost glistens on the inside of the window glass. To survive, the nobility engaged in their own desperate hacks, the heated stone ritual. Servants scurried to heat bricks or stones in the kitchen fire, wrapping them in cloth and tucking them into beds to provide a fleeting hour of warmth. These items, sometimes replaced by roasted turnips or onions, served as absurd but necessary personal heaters. Furthermore, the constant need for heat led to curious anecdotes. Nobles often invited lapdogs or small fowl beneath the covers, their small bodies prized as natural comforters, a bizarre echo of the servants sleeping with livestock. Despite the luxury, noble sleep was fractured and defensive. Chroniclers describe lords waking multiple times in the night to stoke the fire or call for the replacement of cooled stones. Their sleep was never truly restorative, proving that wealth could only soften the cold, it could not banish it. This constant vigilance and reliance on fragile, temporary warmth reveal the ultimate failure of the castle. The psychological comfort of the silk and velvet was immense, but the physical reality of the damp stone remained victorious. You stand in the silence before dawn, having witnessed the eternal siege waged by the cold, and the stark, unjust divide between the castle's inhabitants. The peasants outside, in their smoky, low-ceilinged cottages, were often warmer, their simple design and communal living serving as a better defense than the grand fortress. The castle traded warmth for grandeur, protection, and pride, and its inhabitants, from lord to servant, paid that price nightly. The soldiers' sleep was a vow. They survived not through the convenience of architecture, but through resilience and primitive hacks: wool, straw, laughter, and communal heat. The servant's body, marked by frostbite, was a living testament to the cruelty of the stone. The nobles' constant complaining, despite their furs, was a testament to the failure of wealth. You realize that the survival of these people was the castle's greatest miracle, not its battlements or towers, but the stubborn endurance of the human spirit. As the air grows still and the shadows retreat, let the struggles of that long night fade. Allow the memory of their resilience to be a quiet assurance. If they could survive the bone-marrow aching chill, you too can let go of the day's worries. You have witnessed the profound failure of the great fortress to provide the most basic human need. The cold is patient, but it cannot stop the sun. The soldiers' sleep was a declaration. They would not be defeated by the stone cold. Every breath in that night was a victory. The truth echoes through history. No one truly lasted a night here. They merely endured it. If you found this journey through history compelling and admire the resilience of those who survived the Great Frost Lie, please give Flow of History a like and subscribe. Let your curiosity be the fire that lights up the hidden corners of the past. Rest easy. Morning always comes.